Today we're going to be going over the demo for techniques with acrylic paint. I have mine on a paper plate today. Normally I do have it in my paint palette, which is the ice cube tray, just because the wells are a little bit deeper. It's easier to mix the colors and they don't dry out as quickly. Okay, this is a good alternative if you just need a paint palette that's super quick. It's something that you can find every day in your house. So say you go home and you get an acrylic paint set and you want to practice, but you can't go buy a paint palette, you can't use your parents' ice tray, you can just use a paper plate. Okay? Go ahead and write acrylic at the top. So that's A-C-R-Y-L-I-C. So this is acrylic paint. I want you to make a star and write permanent. So, star and permanent. Keep it off your clothes. And then split your paper, going vertically down the middle. And we're going to create 8 sections. So, you start off by sectioning off the middle. Yes? Just use pen or pencil. And then section it off again. So we just split it in half. We have 4 boxes. Split again. And one more time. We're going to be doing similar techniques to what we did with the tempera paint. Or sorry, that was the watercolor one. Where'd you go? So before we've done watercolor and tempera. So tempera, we're going to be doing dry brush, the underpainting, loaded brush, pressure, and a few other techniques as well. So start off up here. You can write dry brush. Then we're going to try it with a wet brush. Loaded brush. A flat wash. So again, for the top 4 boxes, we're going to have dry brush, so D-R-Y, B-R-U-S-H. And then wet brush, W-E-T, B-R-U-S-H. A loaded brush, so L-O-A-D-E-D, B-R-U-S-H. And flat wash, F-L-A-T-W-A-S-H. Underneath that, we're going to do a gradient. So a gradient or graded wash. So I'm going to put graded wash. This is similar to what we did with the watercolor techniques. Because watercolor and acrylic are super easy to blend. Tempera is not as easily to blend because of the type of material it is. Then we're going to have the very graded, where we use various colors. So V-A-R-I-G-R-A-T-E-D, wash. The bottom we're going to have underpainting. Which is similar to layering. So underpainting, U-N-D-E-R. P-A-I-N-T-I-N-G. And the last one, we're going to have texture or dabbing. It's kind of like stippling. So slash dab, slash stipple. And this is not dab like the dance move. This is dab like the technique that's been around before the dance move. So from the bottom to the top, you're gonna have texture dab slash stipple, underpainting, graded wash, very graded wash, flat wash, loaded brush, dry brush, and wet brush. Go ahead, right now I have my brush with the green handle, which is for acrylic and tempera paint, in the water. I'm going to kind of rub it off on the sides to get some of that water off and dry it off. So I'm going to start with dry brush technique. So just take my brush out when I dry it off all the way. Then we're going to pick a color to do dry brush technique. Make sure your brush is dry all the way. As you can notice, y'all, I do still have paint on my hands. The paint will come off your skin and just take some scrubbing. But again, this paint, since it's acrylic, it will not come off clothes or cloth-like material. Hard surfaces, hair, skin, nails would all come off of. So I'm just going to pick a color. I'm going to do blue. Kind of tap it off a couple times so we just have a little bit. So you'll be rubbing that off on the edge of your container. And you can try that dry brush technique. So this technique would be really good for adding texture or like kind of doing a light blending of materials that you don't want to be super smooth. And I'm kind of tapping in other colors like white and black. And when I'm painting, I'm barely applying any pressure. Like my brush is just kissing the top of the paper. It's not pressing down hard. I'm not pressing down with the full thing. I'm just barely touching it. So dry brush technique. If you have too much paint on your brush, it's going to come out too smooth and too perfect. You don't want it to be a solid line. You want it to be that broken, kind of frayed out line. Once you finish the dry brush technique, we will need to clean off the brush and move on to the wet brush technique. So again, after the dry brush, you tap your brush in the bottom of the cup and notice how it already changes colors. Y'all, this water, like the tempera paint, does not have to be changed out that often because all the cup is for cleaning off your brush. With watercolor, that's a little different because you're actually using the water to mix with it. So you sometimes have to do that. So clean it off, dry it off. Or not dry it off all the way, just kind of tap it off. So just a little bit of water's on there. Then I want you to pick a color. So for example, some red. And with my slightly wet brush, go ahead and paint that wet brush. And notice how the paint thins out just a little bit. So when you have a slightly wet brush, it thins the paint out so where you can come back and add other colors and mix it and it's not too much paint on there. So wet brush, a slightly wet brush. Pick a color and fully paint that wet brush section. So wet brush technique. And again, as soon as you finish painting that section, we do need to clean off our brush. And remember, anytime we are not using our brush, you need to keep it wet in the water because just like our clothes, our brush can get ruined by the acrylic paint. So for example, if you look up here, here are some brushes that have been permanently ruined because people decided to not clean these brushes properly. So notice that there's no give. The brush is pretty much cemented together because of the paint. So it bends near the base, but the tip of the brush is completely ruined. So these brushes are gonna have to be, they're no longer usable. I use them only as examples to show students. of what happens if we choose not to use our brushes correctly and if we choose not to take care of them correctly. Because once you ruin a brush, you can't use it anymore, you have to throw it away. So cleaning off my little brush and dry it off. And I'm gonna keep my brush wet. I'm actually gonna dip more into water, so I'm dipping more into water. And then get a little bit of paint off to the side. So in a separate paint section, mix that water and the paint together. We wanna thin it out to where it's liquidy, almost like as if it was like colored water or colored milk. So you want it thin like milk with water and your color. And if you want, you can even add a second color to it. And then keep mixing it. Make sure it's nice and liquidy. We want lots of water. Is this far? Okay, I'll send it. Tyler, you can go get your sketchbook from the office. So we want lots of water, so I'm even getting more water on my brush just to mix off to the side. Then, here's the cool part. Take it, and we want to completely fill up this. So flat wash means the entire area should be the same color, the same consistency. So the water thins out the paint enough for us to do a flat wash over it. You don't always have to use water with acrylic paint. You can actually just use it straight as is. The water does help it flow smoother. So for some techniques, you don't use it. So for example, if you're doing something that's supposed to be smooth and flowing, such as water, right? If you're trying to paint like the ocean or paint the water, you'd want to use a little bit of water with your paint so that it flows off the brush and it's gets on the paper smoothly. So mix your color and just lightly apply it. And even though we're painting on paper today, painting on paper and canvas is two different things. The canvas will hold the paint more because it has more teeth, which that's like the texture of the canvas itself. Like if you were to look at a canvas, you'll see little grooves or little indentions, and that's kind of like texture or grit to hold the paint to keep it in place. After you finish the flat wash, and again that was adding water to it, you want to clean off the brush. And dry. Then we want to do the loaded brush technique. So loaded brush is when you come around here and you load up the brush with a good amount of paint. So I'm coming here and I'm loading it up. Look at this. There's a big old pile on my paintbrush. And it is easier with a bigger paintbrush, but because we're doing this in our sketchbook, we're using an appropriate size paintbrush. So nice and loaded, there's a pile of paint on there. Once I got it on there, I can start applying this paint. And notice how, since I'm using two colors, what happens to those two colors as you paint? They start to mix right on the paper. The more you blend, so the more you go over the same area, that's gonna blend those colors more and more together. The less you go over the same area, the less it'll blend, so the more streakier it'll be. So if I were to keep on sitting here and painting and painting and painting and painting and painting, that would all blend together. So loaded brush, that's when you load up the brush pretty heavy, and get it nice and big, and then apply that to your surface. So loaded brush. So take another moment to make sure you have all 4 boxes done. Then we'll move on to the bottom half of our paper and techniques page. And remember, as soon as you're done, you can clean off your brush. Use the little grooves on your can. The reason why I like to use cans is because those little grooves help to really clean out the paint that may be stuck inside the bristles. So you'll know your brush is completely clean, because if you clean it like this, you take it off and dry it, there should be little to no paint on your brush, right? So there's a little bit of yellow, but that was on the handle. But overall, I can do a hand test. So if I hold my hand and I wipe it, as long as there's no paint on there, my brush is clean and my brush is good. If there's still paint on there, I would want to clean off my brush, because if I were to go in and tap into white and I have yellow still on my brush, then all of a sudden, instead of having white, I'm going to have a light yellow. Next up, we're going to do our graded wash. So for this one, you're going to pick a color. So for example, let's do red. So I'm going to start with red by itself. So I'm going to grab my red, and I'm going to start with my red up here, load up my brush with the red, and I'm going to paint about halfway down. Then, because I want it to go lighter, I'm going to grab into white. Notice, I'm grabbing from the edge, so y'all should be grabbing from like your corner or the edge so that you're not messing up your entire paper. With the white on the brush, we're going to start midway, and we're going to work our way down and then back up. So back up into the red with the white, then grab more white and use more white at the bottom to get an even lighter color. Notice, you want to have a smooth transition. You do not want it to look blocky or chunky. So you want it to flow from light, or from dark to light, or light to dark. If you're having difficulty, if there's a section where it just looks like red and then white, so for example, let me clean this off. If it just looked like this, where it was just a giant red section, and it's not blended, you'd want to go over it more to blend. So I could go over it more like this, just taking my brush back and forth until I can blend that together nice and light. So that is our graded wash, going dark to light or light to dark. Very graded wash is similar, except instead of doing monochromatic, which this is monochromatic, meaning it's one color, going light to dark, it's various colors. So you can start with your lightest color. So for example, I could start with like a yellow or a light yellow, so I could grab white and yellow and mix a little bit together to make a pastel yellow. I could start with my light yellow, so white and yellow. You do not have to do the same colors as me, y'all. You can choose to do different colors. Then I can transition that to like a green. So I can do, I'm still doing pastel, so I can do white, yellow, a little bit of blue. So I can have a pastel green color. So white, yellow, and a little bit of blue to get a kind of lighter green. So remember what I said about colors being blocky. Is this blocky or blended right now? Blocky. Blocky. So when blending, you don't have to have paint on your brush. I can actually wipe off the paint so I can pinch it off. Then I can blend in between. This will help because it'll actually stop applying as much paint and help you blend. Or come back with your lighter color to help it mix together. So notice how now it's a softer transition and it's not as harsh. It's blending. Then I could transition it to another color. So for example, I could do like red or blue. I'm gonna do a blue. And I'll add a little bit of white to it still so I can get that lighter blue. And again, make sure to blend in between. And that is our variegated wash. So that means it's various colors that are a gradient going from light to dark or anywhere in between. So variegated wash. When we're done with that, you can clean off your brush. I want you to do a flat wash for where it says underpainting. So start with a flat wash like we did before. So remember, for a flat wash, you get a little bit of water, mix it with the color that you want. So for example, light blue. Make sure it's nice and watery so that it's thin. We want it thin so we can do layers. I'm going to apply that flat wash to my surface. And we're going to let that dry before we come back to it. So underpainting, do a flat wash to start it off. Then clean your brush and dry. So for the underpainting section, do a flat wash of your choice of color. I personally chose to do a light blue, but you can choose something different. Then clean and dry. For the final one, it's our texture dab or stipple. We're going to start by painting one color. So you can do that light blue still if you want. I'm not worried about watering it down. I just want a light blue. Or whichever color you're painting. And it does not have to be a flat wash, which means I do not have to mix water with it. I can just use my light blue as is. Then I'm going to clean and dry my brush. So we're going to try a couple different things to add texture. One thing is we're going to be dabbing or tapping the brush, which is kind of like stippling. So you can pick a color. So for example, dark blue. Dip the tip of the brush in the dark blue. Then what I want you to do is I want you to hold it straight up and barely press down a little bit on like a surface, like your plate or your paper towel, or sorry, the paper towel or your paper. So it's just a little bit dark blue. Then you're going to be tapping it right on top. And what's nice about this texture is you can do it on a dry surface, it'll look different, or you can do it on a wet surface and kind of color combine so that it kind of mixes together. So this would be really good for like making things like a bush or a tree, or adding some texture if you're doing a nature scene, or if you just need texture on a surface. You could also try kind of scumbling, which is also a different texture source. So that's still dryer brush. Oops. A little bit of paint. And you hold the brush up and down, you barely press down, and you can just kind of twirl the brush around and scumble it. So it's dry brush technique, but you're just kind of moving your brush back and forth to get like a texture on there. And then you could also stipple by using the back of your brush to add little dots. So back of the brush, a little bit of paint, and you can just barely press down to add those little dots. Kind of like almost like as if you're stippling or adding shading. So this would be like if you want to add some designs to this area or some patterns or stars if you're doing white in the sky. So this is the back of the brush, and that way you can get a nice little dot. And remember, the more you do it in one area, the darker that area will look. So all together, we did a dry brush technique, which was no water, so dry brush. A wet brush, which is a slightly wet brush with paint. Flat wash, which is pre-mixing water with the paint. A loaded brush, which was completely loading up the brush and applying that. Remember, with the loaded brush, the more you mix it on the paper, the more you blend it, the more solid color it looks, versus if you want to have more texture or more lines, the less you'll want to go over it. We have graded wash, which is going from light to dark. That's monochromatic. A variegated wash is various colors that are gradient together. So for example, light blue to a darker kind of blue-green. Oh, the texture, dab, or stipple, we kind of dabbed it right on top. We applied some texture, we scumbled, and we stippled. The very last one that I forgot about is the underpainting. So this should be pretty much dry because it's a flat wash. You want to clean off your brush, dry it, and then you can paint directly on top of that surface. So what's really nice about this paint is you can just come back and paint right on top. And then you have a background or underpainting and something on top. And if you really wanted to take it to the next level, you could let this dry and do another flat wash on top and then paint even more on top. So basically underpainting with flat washes is a great way to layer on top of each other continuously. And once you finish practicing all these techniques, then I want you to apply at least 3 different ones to your own practice painting for the remainder of class. So finish up these techniques, make sure you got them down, open up to a new page, and you can apply these techniques until it is time to clean up.